Hello, it's week 16 of season 7 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is Don't Miss a Good Bet. Gooder is curious about a stranger in town who's sitting in the diner, but Andy's not concerned about him. And Gooder goes and sits next to him to try to find out who he is, but he don't find out much. And later, the stranger comes into the daughter shop while Gooder is in there, and he introduces himself to Floyd as George Jones. He says he heard that Floyd is a successful businessman in town, and he's looking for 4 or 5 investors to rent some digging equipment. He wants to find the Ross treasure that he's heard about from the government land right here in the Mayberry area.
But Floyd and Goober think that's funny. They say folks around here have been digging for that treasure for years, ever since the Civil War. No one's ever going to find anything.
But the guy says he's got a net from the family idol of his great aunt, who's a descendant of one of Ross's raiders from the Civil War, and he goes to the hotel to get it. And Gooder runs and tells Andy that Andy's not impressed, and he tells Gooder not to mess with this guy. And Gooder's a little offended that apparently Andy thinks that he and Floyd are easy narcs. So he tells Andy, okay, if you don't want a taste of the action, suit yourself. And he leaves. And Andy won't let Ulti go with him. But he does tell Ulti who the Ross's raiders were. They went around during the Civil War stealing stuff. And one time they stole a big payroll from a Union troop train. $100,000 in gold.
But the Union troops surrounded them, so the raiders buried the treasure, the legend goes, and folks say the treasure's still up there. Meanwhile, Mr. Jones takes Floyd and Goober out with the map, and they find all the landmarks on the map with the land. So they're excited.
And Mr. Jones spells out the deal. If they find the treasure, he'll take 50%, and the other investors will split 50%. And Gooder and Floyd each pledge $100. And Mr. Jones says now we just need 3 more investors so we can rent the digging equipment. And that night at the supper table, Andy is telling Aunt Bee and Helen and Ulti that he thinks this Mr. Jones might be a scan artist. And then Gooder comes in and he starts excitedly talking about the investment while they're all trying to eat. And Aunt Bee says Andy was just saying that this is chancy. And Andy says not interested, and Gooder leaves. And Aunt Bee and Helen say Floyd and Gooder are usually so conservative. This just shows you what greed can do to a person.
And then when they're alone in the kitchen, Aunt Bee and Helen say, let's go in on it. You only live once, regardless of what they just said about Goober and Floyd.
And then they go meet Mr. Jones at the diner to give them their money. And he says this is a gamble, and he does feel a little strange taking money from women. He says, I could take your money and disappear. And both ladies say they trust him. And he says, now I just need 1 more $100 investor. And they say, let's go ask Andy. But not only does he say no, he's upset to hear that they gave him their money.
And then later, Goober and Floyd are in the barbershop talking about what they're going to do with all their money that they're going to make. And Andy comes in and they offer to let him be the 5th investor, and he says no.
And they say Mr. Jones is going to get the equipment tomorrow morning in case you change your mind by then. So Andy is walking by the diner later and he sees Mr. Jones in there, and he goes in and he tells him he wants to be the 5th investor. He says he was skeptical, but he's figured there comes a time in everyone's life when you just gotta go. And Andy asks him to keep it a secret, and he's the 5th investor. And then he gives him $30, and he says he'll go to the bank and get the rest.
And the next morning, Goober and Floyd are waiting on Mr. Jones at the digging site, and he hasn't shown up by 9 o'clock, and then by 10 o'clock, and then by much later.
And meanwhile, Mr. Jones is at the train station buying a one-way ticket to Florida. And later, Aunt Bee and Helen and Gooder and Floyd are all in the Taylor living room, all sad that they lost their money, 'cause they heard about the train ticket. And then Andy comes in, and when he hears the news, he don't say I told you so, which the four of them appreciate. Of course, they don't know the real reason that he's not saying it. And later, Andy tells the Thor then in the courthouse that the police in Miami caught the guy with the money, and they're sending the $500 back right away. And they say, $500? Who is the fifth investor? And Andy says, I'll ask around.
We'll see you next week for episode 17.